I mean, I think it's been a fantastic day. I think we've had some great presentations. I think we've looked back 20 years, we've looked back 10 years. People have come through with lots of kind of ideas and lots of concepts and lots of experiences. I suppose the question is now, where do we go from here? So if that's, and clearly if that's all you take away from the day, that's very good, but there's probably more. And I was thinking that firstly there's a big question about what kind of stage are we actually operating this on, and what do we actually want to achieve? Is it about changing higher education? And clearly if it's about changing higher education, it can't just be about changing academic careers, it also has to change the whole basis of it. Now there are a lot of conferences taking place, and have been for the last 2 years, on the future of higher education. Most of those are not in the UK, but 1 or 2 of them are. So there is a big debate, which we haven't really touched on at all today, about how you develop an alternative organisational basis for higher education. It seems to me that has to be part of the debate. Because some of it's about funding, some of it's about who controls it, some of it's what you actually do in it, some of it's about how you really do value things like teaching and research, which at the moment we only value in a monetary way, we don't value it in any other way. So teaching excellence is defined by whether your students get a very well paid job in the private sector. That's not exactly the kind of value that most of us really want to sign up to. So I think in thinking about what you take away and what we do next, I think it's quite important to think about how can we start to ourselves get engaged in the process of changing higher education. Because academics are quite good at critiquing higher education, but they're not quite so good at suggesting what we might do next. And also thinking about, some of the things we've heard about people not feeling confident to apply for jobs. There are things you can do about that. And there are lots of people who are not working class who don't feel very confident about that either in higher education. I mean, I do lots of workshops on promotion, right from teaching fellow upwards. And there are all kinds of people who don't feel confident about that. There are ways of helping them. But that's on quite a small scale. I suppose I'm thinking of something bigger. If we look at what some of the major problems of higher education, certainly in the UK, and I think in some other countries, not all other countries, and just remember we've got 4 different systems even within the UK, they're not all the same system, and what happens in Scotland is completely different from what happens in England, and increasingly those two are divided. But let's think, for example, about the black and minority ethnic attainment gap. That's a huge problem. We haven't even touched on that today. Some of that is intertwined with it. Quite a lot of it is, but not all of it is. There are some huge problems that we are not solving. And I think we have to consider about how, not only how do people become, I think people have used words like organic intellectual, people getting more activist. I think those are important, and I think it's more of a challenge now because people are much busier in their jobs, so there isn't that much time. But if intellectuals cannot actually go out there and do something in the public space, it seems to me that that's a problem, particularly in public universities. But it's also, how can we actually do something that's effective, but is looking forward? And how can we do something which isn't just looking at one system? Because some of these problems are common to a lot of different systems. So if you look at the mess that the South African higher education systems in at the moment, for example, and the debate about who should pay fees, that's a huge issue too. There are lots of other systems that are like that. So it's thinking about not only what will we take away from today, but how do we move forward? If we come back in 10 years, what would we want to have changed in that time? And it's not just people's experiences, that's important. But it's also the experiences of students, it's about the kind of higher education systems we want in the future, and it's also what kind of schooling system feeds into that. Because you can't suddenly change people at 17 or 18. If they've been through a schooling system that doesn't support them, then that's a problem too. So it's really just trying to think about when you kind of look at the little grid, so people got these?
Not yet.
No, okay, so it's saying, what are the 3 most important messages you've heard today? Based on conversations, what changes do you think need to take place in the HE sector and elsewhere? How might we bring about these changes locally, nationally, internationally? Any other observations, comments? I just wanted to put it in a slightly broader compass than I think we have been discussing so far.
Thank you very much. As we said, that's fantastic, Rosemary, and it's very much part of CHEER's tradition. As I said in the introduction, we're trying to move away from this stimulus response, compliance or critique, all these binaries that we get trapped in. And we want to think otherwise and creatively imagine futures rather than just feel trapped in the one that's been offered to us. So this is our opportunity now to broaden the debate, to fantasize, to be really creative. What do we want to see? We don't want to come back in 10 years' time certainly not in 20 years' time, and have rehearsed the same arguments about oppression, exclusion, pain, suffering, internalized oppression, misrecognition. We don't want to keep having that debate. We want to try and move out of that. So let's think about what we'd like to see happen.
When you do it in the absence of like some sort of lobby group which is accessible by people across institutions, things around higher education and how that would how it would wear the leading to some way of doing it and how you get power. And we've got the same generation as I am, we all talk about not losing that collective sense which we talked about, and we started to talk about how the unions would have been the place.
Yes.
Quite worried the role now that a lot of people see.
Absolutely. I mean, the real sort of main message was that how reduced the opportunities are for talking to each other and discussing and theorising our experiences. And that one of the questions we had is, can we put that pain to work? So we don't want the binary between the interior world and external action. That all we do when we talk about class is reflect inwards and use it as an opportunity for a little bit of a therapy session, to a bit of catharsis for all our class pain. That's on one end. And then on the other end is action, activity. Can the two come together a bit more creatively? Can we put the pain to work? Yeah, was one of our questions. And you know, really, the vocabulary that we've known for a long time, solidarity, revolution, etc. How do we stop the compliance culture? How do we stop it so that we have this huge gulf between what we feel and what we have to perform all the time? So that often when we're in professional situations, whether it's in the academy or elsewhere, we're just dealing with the performances. And we don't really know what's happening for people. And that's what makes it so difficult to get any sense of a community, because everybody's so defending, so anxious, and so fearful about non-compliance that they perform. So you deal with that performance, you don't know what's happening for people. Is that an accurate summary? So we want a recuperation of consciousness raising. Yes, go ahead.
Why do you want to stop like the complaining culture?
If
we don't complain...
No, I didn't say that at all. Compliance.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
The opposite. Now we compliance.
Do you mind if I take something back from our table? We were discussing, you know, that issue of agency in a sense, and I posed the question about what makes for a catalysing moment. If you think of the past several years, most of it's been horrific, even for the privileged, you know, for us, for the privileged. And yet, it's the first time I've been back out on the streets, as it were, in a group of women, self-consciously mobilised under the banner "Feminists Against Trump," or words to that effect. And it was, you know, I mean, it had its internal disagreements, many, no doubt, subsequently, but at the time it was fantastic, and it felt brilliant, and I think we made a statement from our various corners just by being there in public. Now, how do you transfer the private pains into public issues?
Exactly.
You know,
and you're on camera, so that's your immigration to the US. Exactly. How do we turn private pain into public action? And how do we not binary them? Other questions. So that's just one table, I think. And other comments?
I don't think you have to ask the question if you get really cross.
Go on.
Well, do you remember that seminar that you and others did? It was the bearer thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Gaby and I were enraged by the stories of what was happening
I know.
to staff in universities. I mean, we were both retired, and we thought that we went into the seminar and we were nice and relaxed and thought we would have a nice life. And then we listened to all this stuff, and we were horrified and really, really angry. And we've done something, I don't know, I mean, we've got some out as an article. I think we're about to send it off to the Times Higher, see if we can't stir up a bit of energy that way. But unless there's a bigger, Emily, that was just Gaby and I.
Yes.
Unless there's a bigger group that can do more things on a wider scale, then I think we're always going to be condemned to the individual and the local,
Yes.
however angry we are.
Yes. Yes. And I think you're relating very much to what Valerie said this morning about the autobiography of the question, and how often our intellectual work, our research, our scholarship revisits those affective moments where we've been very disturbed, very disconnected, very hurt. And it's a way of talking back, isn't it, to do? And you went out and you did some fabulous research. Okay. Any other comments? Yes.
I think it's actually something we were talking about at the end about thinking about intergenerational solidarity, and that it's something quite important, I think, that's come through today, that not only have things not changed very much since 1997, but things have actually got worse. And, your point that, being retired and then seeing what's happening now and being horrified because you kind of see it at a slight distance. And just that older generations of academics are in a different situation to younger generations of academics coming through the system, whether the union is representing all those different interests, and then students. Students coming through now are in a much less situation than, when I was a student, undergrad student or whatever. So there's something about how do you put into action a kind of intergenerational solidarity that and we were talking about the union, weren't we? How a lot what things need to happen, how there can be strategic alliances between the student union, teachers unions, and also the clean. Somebody was talking about
the cleaner union. So that during conversations you were talking about making connections with other unions doing good work. So.
So we were. How do you bring that to bear? Because there's also something about the sliding rationale about what a university is and what higher education is for, and just losing some. You can kind of tinker around the edges, but actually, how do you take back the narrative about what it all means, sort of thing. So do you want to say what you were talking about with the unions?
Something I was talking about with Daniel, to Daniel, about at lunch, which was this idea of, I think if the unions had pay as you can afford, there'd be more members. And it sounds radical, but this idea of, I can't guarantee that I can afford the whatever it is, £22 a month right now, given that I'm on a contract, and but I can say that I feel like the union is worth money. Right now they have none of my money. If they'd like some of my money, then they could make it pay as you can afford, and I'd join and then be a member, and then I'd pay more as membership became more affordable for me. Without my money or my voice to help them have that collective solidarity, what are they going to do? So I feel like they'd probably like me rather than not have me a member, and so there could be something more radical about membership. I know that
students that we're losing.
Yeah. And I know that the UCUs just said that PhD students can join for free, which I think is their push to have younger members join. But there's still a whole bunch of early career researchers like me who are like, well, what's the point? You can have none of my money, or if you'd like some of it, be radical about your practices.
Okay, Meg, I was going to ask you to respond, Meg.
Oh, no, I was going to about the unions. I was awfully sorry. Could I pick up a point that was made by the other colleague? I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Helen. I think what Helen said sort of rang alarm bells for me. You were talking about students and changes. And something that I've noticed in my university is the very high levels of distress and anxiety that our undergraduates come to us with and experience during our courses, so that we have more, it's like, go on the mindfulness course, that'll sort you out. And you're going to be okay. But I think that, and it's picking up on what Rosemary was saying, it's about children in school now being put through these high-level, high-stake accountability testing all the time. They're working, and worrying and not being good enough, and then they've got to be good enough to get to a good university, and then they've got to get good enough A-levels. By the time they come to university, they're mental wrecks, and it's just like that whole stressy thing of anxiety and laying it on people. And then they come to university and then they're on their own and they can't use the library and they're doing all these modules and they're being assessed all the time. And it is a ferociously cruel, it's a ferociously cruel thing that we do to people, sending them to schools and universities and doing this to them. We have a very big counselling team in my university. There's like counsellors on every campus, and they're like really overloaded. They can't cope because the amount of referrals and self-referrals is so high. Now I don't know if that's the same for other colleagues in other places, but I know it's a real worry, and it's almost like it transcends everything, isn't it?
And Paul's been looking at this for doctoral students, because there's currently moral panic, isn't there, about stress and mental health, and now it's hit the doctoral. And when we've been discussing it, apart from the fact that it is all about the individual and the solution is cognitive rather than social, there's also the question about why now? Why is it now on the policy agenda? Why wasn't it before? Is it that people are more stressed now, or is it that there are real economic fears that people will drop out and the fees will drop? Yes.
Well, I think that perhaps it wasn't as bad before, because all this stress and all this we need and it has an imaginary, or not imaginary, a reward. Yes. We did it because it will be rewarded.
Yes.
We will be rewarded with having a good job, a stable job, prestigious job, a prestigious place in society.
Yes.
And it's what it is now. And so, if you want to change, we have to make mourn. I would say mourn that expectation.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And Mariam, you've told us lots of times about the naturalisation of stress. That it's seen as part of the journey, and it's kind of good for you to have that. It's a bit of a virility test. You know, if you can cope and manage stress, then you're on the way to getting a good qualification, a good job. But I think what you're saying, Gloria, is the contract's been broken.
Exactly. Exactly. The subjective contract also.
Yes, and then Rosemary.
Yes, I just like to answer the question that you asked earlier about why do we reform?
Yes.
And we reform because basically we downsize the value of the university to a number in ranking, in a global ranking. So, I mean, I thank everybody today who shared their experience, because as international students, I didn't know any of that. I didn't expect to hear all of these stories today, because we are basically protected from that. What we receive is a glossy handbook saying, no, it's true, everything is tolerant, we are in that ranking in the world, and everything is here. Exactly. We are accepting, and if you had any feeling of, oh, maybe that was wrong, you start to question yourself, because no, that's just me. They are tolerant and they are accepting and they are diversified. And so I think it's quite a learning experience for me in person, but again, the whole issue of ranking and standards and numbers pushes universities to perform, and I'm saying that coming from the OECD, but we played a huge part in having this standardization across the globe, and how everything will be translated into numbers, and that's what people look at. So instead of basically finding a solution for your problems, they start to implement programs as cosmetics, which say, we have this and we have that, and so
which links to what we were talking about, the privatisation of pain. People perform on top of all that pain, and you're told to shut up and get on with it, don't give a voice to it. And when you do, it's dangerous, it's extremely dangerous. So then you bring in all the mental health services. You work on people in order to kind of reposition them. We have Rosemary.
Yeah, we few things. I mean, one is that we talked quite a lot about widening participation, because quite a lot of the elite universities where they do admit widening participation students, they might give them lower offers, but once they get there, they say, oh, just get on. And they're actually developing proper support. And I mean, Vicky Bolivar and Stephen Doyle have done quite a lot of research on this. But they can't be bothered, but somebody needs to make them. And we also felt that although the offer agreements cover all sorts of things, firstly they're mainly about things before people get there, but also, although they're monitored in a very loose sense, that actually if you promise to do something in offer, it should be monitored properly and evaluated properly, and actually what came out of it at the other end, not some just vague tiny little change in your benchmark kind of progression. And we also thought that maybe instead of kind of thinking about students who don't progress or students who aren't retained, that you actually target the programs that have low progression rates. Because that way you actually start to change it for everybody. And that may also be a backdoor way of kind of decolonising, liberating, whatever you want to call the curriculum. Because if the programme has to be overhauled, then you can do some of those things as well. And the other thing was thinking about, I know some people don't like Athena Swan, but I think Athena Swan, because it involves a lot of data, you can use that selectively, that you can bring in things like that. Some funding bodies require you to have Athena Swan recognition now before you can even apply, so there are some levers. And that goes back to the lead terms. Anything that affects their lead terms, vice chancellors will act on.
Yes.
So something like that affects it. And that also goes to the Race Equality Charter. They collect lots of data, you offer things that you're trying to do, so that is another mechanism. So sometimes, although we need to invent some new ones, sometimes using the ones we've got already is also quite a good idea.
For our international visitors, the offer is the Office of Fair Access. But I'm sure Daniel will have something to say, because this is his research, but there's something about penalising the programme. Penalising the programme. Because that rings alarm bells with me, because it's suggesting some programmes will take fewer risks. It's a bit like what Dave Gilbourne's and Deborah Udell's work, the A to C economy, that schools will only the schools will only accept people who are going to get A grades. And it worries me if programmes start to be evaluated for failing
It's not penalising them, it's actually choosing interventions which can improve it. That's quite different to it's not about penalising, it's about improving them. Because it's about having interventions which help them to get better correction rates.
Okay, but one of the the really major concerns has been that the areas of the academy that take risks and let in the underrepresented are often they often get into some sort of trouble because they're taking risks. So anyway. Other comments? Tables? What have you come up with? Big messages? What do you want to see? Tables you want to see?
Well, we let our imagination run completely wild, and we suggested the need for a comprehensive education system, right from to build the habitus right through the system. So start somewhere. So start anywhere. Start with the younger people.
Yes.
Socialise public schools, because, and then Miriam reminded us that that was attempted in 1968, and that the world, the heavens fell in, and so maybe we can have another go. But I mean, these are wild imaginings. But and Daniel reminded us that in Argentina they do have a comprehensive higher education. Sorry, well, he mentioned Argentina. I was there when he spoke to me. I remember it. Not that credit. But there is a lot of churn. So after the first year, students get decanted out. Now, is that a bad thing? Maybe as long as they can come back in. As long as they could come back in. And can you imagine a university that isn't selective?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just to imagine it is a thought experiment that requires a lot of capacity and energy. But I mean, unless we start thinking and floating that vocabulary somewhere, I mean, it's probably not a very wise political move, but I mean, unless you start thinking the unthinkable, it will never ever get thought, and we'll be stuck in this torture, toxic, punitive system that doesn't seem to, well, it rewards a minute fraction. Having been to that seminar on the elite education, and having read Jane Kenway et al.'s book, Class Choreographies, even the super elite, jet-setting, mobile subjects who roam the globe transnationally, dropping into elite schools wherever, they don't get the top jobs. So this kind of notion of a fantasy haunting us is doing a hell of a lot of work to keep us stuck. So how do you get rid of those hauntings and get new hauntings?
Well, we don't have to imagine universities that aren't selective. We just have to look to the private sector.
Oh, true.
It's a market relationship. You just buy your way in. They are not, a lot of them are not selective. And a lot of underrepresented groups are being shunted into the peripheral private higher education system, particularly women, particularly working class, particularly mature students. People, again, citing Jane Kenway, people who have to buy a higher education rather than have an entitlement to it.
Yeah.
And they are not selective. As long as you can pay the fees, you're in. Other questions? Other comments?
I'm going to mention our other one.
Oh, great.
Our big challenging male power for the future.
Yeah, why not? Add it on.
We've got 5 minutes to answer. Go on, let's hear. Mary, you've been doing it all your life, since I've met you.
We were talking about that and how to, a way forward is to deal with, and these two wonderful women told us about what's going on in their location, locale, about how to deal with male power and sexual harassment, and how to disrupt the predatory behaviour, which might make a huge difference to the culture of universities and wider culture as well, because if we start with somewhere, and these are our places, this was how we might bring about change, thinking about challenging that as a way forward, because it's not just about class, it's actually about male, well, it's about class of the other, male power in the institutions itself.
And that links so much to the narratives we heard today, which so many of them are underpinned with feelings of fear. Fear of fraud, being found out, being thought of a fraud, fear of failure, fear of the wrong accent, fear of not fitting in, etc. It's all part of that, isn't it? That people learn to self-minimise because they're so scared of the consequences. What would happen if we weren't afraid of being found out, if we weren't afraid of violence, if we weren't afraid of being assessed negatively all the time?
Can I say something, Louise?
Yes, Gloria, of course.
Yeah, well, I was telling Daniel that when I was young, we decided not to name us as academics, but as knowledge workers.
Yes.
And so that I mean, self-representation is very important in terms of how you imagine change, because change will also mean that you will change your self-representation.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a circle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Just thinking in terms of the conversation with regards to kind of male power.
Yes.
Something that I think would be, in terms of building a base of solidarity, something that was talked about today was the idea of a middle class academic not necessarily feeling as able to act or speak in solidarity with academics from working class backgrounds because they're not an academic from a working class background themselves. If it came to male power and it was sexual harassment, I think males speaking out and up for females with regards to things that they observe or in solidarity if a complaint's made could be something that would be immediately actionable, if you like, or something that dialogue could be opened,
Yes.
you know,
yes.
things
Yes.
could be done.
Yes, and I mean that's a long tradition, isn't it, about allies, finding allies, not leaving it all to the oppressed group to do all the struggling and the fighting. Jessica.
So the point you were making a little bit about like taking the risk to be resistant, and actually when we're talking about where do we have spaces for resistance, for those of us on precarious contracts who, for example, can't afford to not be employed. And for me, and maybe this isn't good for my career, I don't care if I'm refugable because I'm on a part-time contract. If my university cared if I was refugable, they'd put me on a permanent contract. So I'm pursuing publications, my articles, book chapters, fine, but I don't care if those are the quality that my university cares about, and even though they probably aren't happy about that, what loyalty do I have to them if I'm on a part-time contract? And I think recognizing that actually we have space we could use to resist, even if it's small, that there's ways I can resist that are small but still meaningful. And I think especially with the looming possibility of Brexit, which has been voted for, I could go elsewhere. And academics have already started to go elsewhere. So I feel like there's a voice and a power we're not using because they're going to lose a bunch of us to places that appreciate us more. So we can resist those compliances.
That's lovely. I mean, that's a lovely shifting of the discourse, because one of the narratives about precarity is it makes people more governmentable. And what you've just said is you've turned it around. You're less governmentable because they're not investing in you. So you're not gonna comply and perform. But that used to be when I was telling Valerie, when I first went to the Institute of Education in 1998. Everybody knew was on a short-term contract because you had to go in and prove yourself. And they didn't want to take the risk of giving you a permanent contract if you didn't perform for the research audit at that time. So it's kind of double-edged, isn't it? That it could actually be going wrong. And I just think recently there's been a big debate, hasn't there, about has the world become ungovernable with all the chaos that we're seeing all around. And that was some of the conversation that we had on our table. Why are we so easily regulated and governed when the rest of the world is going up in flames?
Yeah, I think we discussed that a little as well, about the value of teaching people or having some kind of aspect of criticality, or whether it's teaching sociology, but then we sort of explored the difficulties of that when people want to be governed in particular ways and want to invest in narratives that go against, their own situation. What do you do then? And when we're teaching things like sociology and inequality, or talking about with research participants, how do you manage that when these people are in positions of inequality and they're invested in, say, meritocracy or narratives of social mobility? And so we did talk about that quite a bit as well. Didn't get an answer.
Is there anything anybody would like to say before we end? Marianne?
It's just a quick thought that sometimes in events like this, we are really preaching to the converted. So how do we actually reach out to the wider community in higher education? And how do we raise awareness, which I think is the very first step about all the issues that we're talking about here. It's not okay to walk around always feeling stressed. It's not okay to develop workshops on how to combat imposter syndrome. Seriously. Well, the question is, why do we have the imposter syndrome in the first place? And it's not okay that people have mental health issues right from the top of the academic ladder up until down to the first year undergraduate students. And I think really these issues need to be addressed at wider spheres, because for a simple reason that mental health issues will explode at some point. There is a maximum, and they are actually exploding now. There have been two well-read, well-cited articles in The Guardian. There is a recent one that came out a couple of months ago in the Times Higher Education about the academic field and how mental health is deeply embedded there, mental health issues, and it's accepted as part of the academic culture all across the ladder. This will go as maybe a couple of years further, but there will be a tipping point where things will collapse because people are human. That's how we are. So I really think that we really need to think about raising awareness and taking this out to the public.
Well, I mean, our generation, we were brought up with R.D. Lang, and we would question, actually, what you mean by mental health.
Exactly.
You know, that it's the refusal to comply is actually a mentally very healthy response. And that getting stressed is actually very healthy because the situation is unhealthy. So that it's not that we're all getting ill, but that it's a form of interaction and resistance with very oppressive structures and environments in which we're working and living and playing and whatever. So I think we have to really problematize the whole concept of what is mental health. And are we being pathologized? Anything else? Any other big messages that you want to give to the room before we love each other and leave each other? Valerie?
I just want to, well, it's probably a silly message, but I don't know whether people here have heard of the Working Class Studies Association. It's mostly Americans, but there are some Brits that go, and I went for the first time last year. And I just wanted to encourage, the conference is in June in Long Island, and you have to get papers in by December. And I'd really encourage people to, if they can get funding to go, I'm quite happy to put forward some symposia to it, or you know, because I think it's a nice forum. They're not all working class academics, I have to say, but you know, there are enough of them, and it is a context in which these things can be talked about.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Anything else before we end? Well, I just would like to thank you all so much for coming today and